Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Reeks, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too. Hello and welcome today to our lovely guest, Michelle Morgan. Hi Michelle.
Hi, Sue.
It's lovely to speak to you today, Michelle. And Michelle is another one of our guests from the other side of the Atlantic. So welcome, Michelle. And
thank you.
By way of a bio, I have some words here from Michelle. Michelle Morgan is an embroidery artist living in New Haven, Connecticut, where she moved a decade ago to complete a PhD in American Studies at Yale University. Born and raised in the woods of Maine, she now works as a digital accessibility specialist by day, assisting faculty at Yale in making their course materials more accessible for students with disabilities. She began her creative life years ago as a cut, paper and mixed media artist before picking up embroidery, almost by accident about 3.5 years ago. Oh, that sounds interesting. Her work explores themes of addiction, compulsion, excessiveness and obsession, as well as handicraft traditions and the relationship between so-called natural and artificial worlds. The first person to attend college in her immediate and extended family, she comes from people who understood themselves through the things they made: welders, carpenters, cooks and factory workers. She also DJs a monthly music show on CT's independent music station, 89.5 FM WPKN. Oh, I love those.
Yeah, you do a job there.
Is a mum to an adult son named Ezra and is married to the phenomenally talented baker and amateur comedian Kate Donato. So there we are. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. You've already given me a great deal of humour just pronouncing Connecticut and that radio station name. So there we are. I'm easily excited, Ansa. Right then. So before we get dug into your stitchery story today, Michelle, would you like to share with us what you're working on and what's got you excited?
Sure. So I am working on, it feels like about 4 different series of pieces right now. I have a show in fall 2019 at the Whitney Humanities Center here at Yale. There's a professor here that I know a little bit, and she loves textile art, loves my embroidery. So she put me in touch with the director there. So they are doing a show. It's a solo show of my work, and it will be my work, but contextualized within like the larger history of embroidery, not just America, but just the way women have used embroidery over centuries to tell stories. So I'm doing a series of pieces that work on old linens that my great-grandmother gave to my grandmother, who gave them to my mom, who gave them to me. So I'm embroidering on top of those.
Right.
And those all deal with family history, some like skeletons in the closet. I am working on a series of tree rings. My father was a carpenter, and my dad's side of the family were a bunch of lumberjacks and owned a small lumber company here. So I'm working on a series of various size tree rings, thinking about the connection between the handicraft of embroidery and lines and the sort of ways that my dad and his brothers and his family really thought of themselves as workers in wood. And then just kind of other random things that I do along the way. I do a lot of abstract pieces that are just full of color and beads and that kind of stuff. So I'm really working on those series most concertedly right now for that show.
Brilliant. And before I forget, then obviously because Michelle has her full-time job at Yale, then her embroidery is a side gig, as it were. Then the best place to get in touch with Michelle would be on good old Instagram, and there she is known as Mutually Assured Deconstructions. Obviously, I will put that in her episode on Stitchery Stories.
Thank you. It's a nerdy academic name that I came up with before I even started embroidering, and now I can't change it because of how people know me.
We'll forgive you. And on there'll be pictures of Michelle's work. Now, she mentioned the tree rings. There's a tree ring, and there's some very heavily encrusted, I think is the best word, very, very brightly coloured pictures as well. There's a nice selection there of images that Michelle has come across. And I actually thought the tree rings was an interesting idea as well, because you're tracking time, aren't you, through a tree ring. So I thought there was a nice connection there with those. Well, that absolutely sounds really exciting. Your own show, Yale University. Good. It's always nice having people who are interested in our work and who are willing to hook us up and give us an opportunity as well. So how exciting!
Yes, it is exciting. The faculty member who hooked me up, she's retiring at the end of the year, moving to California, so she'll be on the other coast. So I'm not even sure she'll be able to see the show, but it was very, very nice of her to put me in touch with the director there.
Yeah, and interesting as well that you're using family fabric and linens that have been passed through the generations as well, because there is a lot of stories through there. And one of a guest from a number of months ago now, from last year, Karen Ruane, is particularly, we talked about this a great deal, about the story, and she'd studied this at a higher level as well, but the stories of women and how women have used textiles to help their family and clothe them, and like the pioneers wrapping them up and making things out of nothing almost. So there is a lot in there of history within those.
Yes, there's an object that I've kind of been obsessed with for the past year or two. There was a slave that was sold in the 19th century here who her granddaughter, I think, embroidered like the story of where this very plain linen sack had come from.
Right.
And recorded the history of that lineage, because, in American slavery, the likelihood of knowing who you came from is very unlikely and abbreviated and kind of cut off. All of those things tell stories, and I very much take that up in my work. I have, like I was mentioning, these pieces that my great-grandmother did. She did lace crochet, and then she also embroidered on some of these linens. And she was a factory worker. She worked in a cotton mill, spinning cotton and making fabric up in Maine. And her sisters were all a little bit wild compared to her. One was a sex worker and she was murdered.
Oh, what? Yeah. Oh, dearie me.
Yeah, like all these like crazy women in the 1940s and the 1950s, but her pieces have been handed down, and I'm trying to incorporate elements of these wild women in this histories that they had but aren't known, and kind of weave those into those fabrics.
Yeah.
A lot of ghosts, but like a lot of really cool women who did unusual things too.
Wow, well, that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, and the as you say, the slave piece, and as you say, somebody actually knowing where they'd come from, and something being handed down as well was quite extraordinary as well, isn't it? Obviously, you're very interested and passionate about what you're doing at the moment. How did you first get interested in embroidery and textile art, Michelle?
Sure. So I was a grad student, as I've mentioned a couple times, and I was writing a dissertation. And when I moved to Connecticut to pursue my graduate studies, I kind of gave up all of my art making. So I had been a cut paper, like always really drawn to very intricate, sort of fine, detailed stuff. I had done a lot of that and some mixed media stuff, and I just sold all of my art supplies and figured I would not have any time to do it as a graduate student here, which was not inaccurate. I was very, very busy the first few years, but I wound up getting really, really, really depressed and drank a lot. Like my whole family has a history of substance abuse, and I was drinking too much, and just, I didn't lose everything, but I just was not in a good place. And a friend of mine, as a joke, had given me a little cross-stitch kit in a Christmas stocking a few years back. And I made it, and the meditative nature of just doing that, the cross-stitch, the needlework, I loved. And so I just started kind of doing it more and more and more, a little bit too much with it.
Another obsession taking over there.
Yes, exactly. From there, I started looking at some different patterns and things online, and then I just realized that embroidery was one step away from cross-stitch. So I saw something that I liked, and I was like, I bet I could do that, and I just kind of copied it, and then it just has never stopped from there. That was about almost 4 years ago now in the spring. And I feel like it saved my life, to be perfectly honest. Like, it just gave me an outlet to be compulsive about something and dive in a way that I really needed, that was constructive and healthy and not self-destructive. So I wound up finishing my dissertation, and because I would give myself like time management, I'd be like, well, I can't embroider all the time. So I have to work on my dissertation, and then as a reward, I'll embroider. That's really how I got into it. And I can't imagine a more perfect medium for me at this point.
Wow. Now that's very different from a lot of my guests and me as well. We all learned when we were a small child, and our mum or our grandma taught us. And then there's been a few people like yourself who, for different reasons, have suddenly discovered embroidery, as it were, self-taught, or good old YouTube, or a book that they found in a second-hand store kind of thing. A very early guest of mine, Amy James, her theme was very much that textile art. She did more quilting, had really helped her deal with mental illness as well. This theme comes back a lot, that creativity and finding something else to channel our obsession, our addiction into, oh God, I'm really dying to get on and do some embroidery. It's a treat, is wonderful. So that's a really interesting story. And thank you for sharing that with us as well, Michelle. I think a lot of people can get a lot of value out of that story. And it's great then when creativity can help somebody change a destructive path into something constructive. And as you say, here you are now, you've got your own exhibition next year. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it in like the word recovery a lot. And I love how it pertains both to embroidery as far as like, okay, so I have these pieces my great grandmother embroidered, right? And they're recovered. They're recovered from a box in the closet somewhere that someone stuck away.
Yeah.
Like they've been recovered in that sense, but also, it's part of my own recovery really. Yeah. And I'm very, very adamant that I speak openly about mental illness and substance abuse and all of the things that people struggle with, because the stigma around it is just so pervasive, at least in the US, it sure is.
Well, I think it is everywhere, definitely.
The connection there, the use of the idea of recovering these old histories and these old textiles, and also the role it plays in my own life, is really important to me.
So when you're starting to think about creating a piece, and we said in your intro there about exploring the themes of addiction, compulsion, excessiveness, and obsession, then how do you translate those? Well, they're not abstract concepts, but it's hard to. It's not like a plant, is it, or a flower or something? Yeah. So how do you go about thinking? Right, I want to do a piece on addiction. How do you translate that into an image? I think is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. So I've been trying lately not to work on more than one piece at a time, just because I don't want a bunch of finished projects. But I do kind of need to go back and forth between something really literal and representational, and then something more abstract. Like I get bored working in the same format all the time. I'll sketch things, just weirdo, like, little cartoons or images in my mind that come into my head. I have like a sketchbook full of those things. And sometimes those turn into embroideries that are more representational, like I just said. When I'm doing the more abstract pieces, to me, those are just the excessiveness, like you use the word encrusted, like the texture and the overwhelmingness of those pieces, to me, have everything to do with sort of my own history as a person in my family, who I love my family. They're also pretty conservative, like rural folk who don't really talk about their feelings and are, they have strong passions and beliefs, but they keep them to themselves.
Yes.
And I'm the opposite. Yeah. So growing up, I was kind of, I don't want to say accused, but often told that I was too much, right? Like everything about me was a little excessive and over the top. And
right.
I think women in general are told that. And so
all the time. Yeah.
All the time. And textile art to me is so meticulous and excessive. Again, like it takes so much focus and it's so particular, and that kind of relationship between I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but the relationship.
It's an interesting one. I like tangents.
The relationship between like all of those tiny stitches, that's excessive. That is like an outlet for that kind of excessiveness that I feel like women are often told not to exhibit externally. And so it just becomes like, it bubbles up out of me. So when I when I'm doing one of those more abstract pieces, it's just like, okay, I've got too much in me even to like make something that's recognizable as an image. I just need to like put everything that's in me onto a piece of fabric. I don't sketch those out at all.
Yeah.
Those just kind of, they're, I just make them as I go.
I love the way that you said it bubbles up, and there's certainly one of the images is a real close-up that you've sent me that we'll put on there.
Yes.
All these colours, and yes, it does look like it's bubbled up. It looks like it's bubbled up out of the fabric. So I think that's a brilliant way. So it's bubbled up out of you and it's bubbled up out of the fabric. So I love that. Brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, that's why I sent the close-up, because it's so hard to photograph this, it's like, I'm not a professional photographer.
It's a lovely photograph, don't worry about it.
But getting the real like in there, it is very, very textual, and not textual, but textural. And you can feel it. Like when I show people, they'll be like, oh, can I touch it? Like there's something, people just want to reach out and touch it.
Yeah.
And I love that, because we're told we're just supposed to look at stuff.
Yeah. We're never allowed to touch anything, are we?
Yeah. Which, and textile art is so much about touch,
Yeah. Not in exhibitions, so you get told off, don't you?
Yes. Yeah. I feel like I should have a piece in the exhibition, maybe, that I'm just like, I put out and it says, please touch me.
Nobody will, because they'll be going, does it really say, please touch me? Yeah. No, nobody will. Yeah, that'd be quite an interesting experiment, won't it? Please touch me and see how many people actually do
it.
You've alluded to some of the inspirations. Do you want to pick out some kind of main ones there for us, and possibly, we've touched on this a bit, but is there any other inspiring people or things that you haven't mentioned so far?
Oh my gosh, so there's so many. I would not even know where to begin as far as other embroidery artists. My entire Instagram is just me following people and taking screenshots and just like zooming them up so I can really see what they've done. Other inspirations besides family and just feminism in general, it's mostly my family. I think it's mostly this idea that the people I am born of and from have always made things with their hands, and that's a different kind of intelligence. And anybody who works anywhere, especially being at Yale or being in an academic program, and everybody's so, lofty and theoretical, and it's all about the mind. But my real respect is for people who make things with their hands. To me, I don't want to romanticize it, but I do want to express like how important and crucial that work is still, even in 2018 or 2019. People who make things with their hands are always my inspiration.
Exactly, because if we don't have those, we can have all the ideas in the world, can't we? But they'll never get anywhere if we haven't got anybody to help bring them to life. So you've got all those different inspirations and different themes that you like to do your work with, Michelle. What would you say are your favourite techniques? Do you have any that you could share with us? And if so, why do you like them so much?
I'm not technically proficient in the way that I would like to be. And I mostly think of my work as drawing or painting, which people go back and forth. I've heard a lot of debates about this. Like, it's not drawing with thread. It's not painting with thread. It's its own medium, and it needs to be respected as such. But I do, like, I love a good satin stitch. Like, I just think I don't know why. Maybe it's, again, the particularity of doing it well. And, techniques as far as any training I've had has just been off YouTube videos, although my mom did teach me how to make a French knot, which was when I first started. I was like, oh, wow, thanks, Mom. She used to embroider her jeans, back in the 60s and 70s. Mostly, though, it's just kind of freehand, and I'm not using any technique that has a recognizable name to it. Although I really did teach myself embroidery, I think mostly by doing satin stitch early on, just kind of filling shapes with satin stitch. Yeah, no, I'm so all over the place. I don't know if there's a name for any of my techniques.
I think certainly some of the ones, like back to that very kind of encrusted one, it's very much embellishment, isn't it? There's a lot of texture and things going on in there. But even such as satin stitch, a lot of the seemingly simple, it's one straight stitch, they're often the most difficult to master. Certainly satin stitch as well. It's very difficult to make it even and the same tension and it all going in the way you want it to go in. Yeah, that's quite a tough one really to master,
It
I
is.
think. Yeah.
I started it by doing birch trees. When I was first learning how to embroider, I would just embroider these birch tree images out of satin stitch. And I think it was really a good exercise for me to do that over and over and over again. I find myself more, like, as far as technique goes, I get more drawn by color than anything else. So like balancing and making colors symmetrical and kind of playing with the color wheel is really important to me, and thinking about the way colors look next to each other. I get guided more by that when I'm making an abstract piece than I do anything else. It's like, okay, well, this color's here and I need some of that over there, and it needs to balance this over here, and thinking about proportion and things like that, really important.
Good one. Right. And then, I mean, you've mentioned just there about the opportunity of the exhibition. Given that you've only been doing this kind of by accident 3-4 years, what has been the high point of your textile art journey so far, Michelle? Then, is it coming up in fall 2019?
Yes. Well, I had some pieces in a show in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is quite a ways away from here. There's an LGBT center there that has an art gallery that's it's not just like a little space for art. They run a gallery. And the woman who helps curate those shows had me and another artist from DC, and Rebecca, I cannot remember her last name. She is pretty well known in the US for her embroidery art. And so they did just an embroidery show, and that was awesome. It doesn't happen very often that you have a show that's just embroidery. And that was really fun. We went for the opening. I sold a bunch of stuff. One of the curators for the second largest, only after the Smithsonian here in the US, textile collections came to view all of our stuff before the show. So we got to have like a private talk with the curator for a really important textile collection here. And that was definitely a highlight. That was last February.
Last February. Wow. Well, that is interesting, isn't it? To say, to have somebody come and look at your work, speak to you about it from a viewpoint of maintaining a major collection.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. It was really exciting. Yeah. I don't think she bought anything for their collection from any of us. But it's okay.
Well, yeah, but most of the battle is getting somebody out of their office, isn't it? To come, and especially, America's a lot bigger place than England is as well.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. And how did you get involved with that? Given that it wasn't on your doorstep either.
It was one of those things where someone follows you on Instagram and it was completely random. I didn't know anybody connected with it. They just selected a few people they wanted to exhibit, which is nice too. Yeah, it's hard. A lot of LGBT centers, if they do shows like that, it's a lot of local stuff. So it was interesting for it to be people who weren't local to have a show there. It was just a serendipity.
Now you see, you say that. So it was like, one of those out of the blue random things, but it wasn't really out of the blue, was it? Because you put yourself out there, you've put your work on Instagram, and somebody's gone and said, right, I'm going to go and look on Instagram and see who I find. You don't know what hashtags they're typed in or what they were looking for. So we always say this. I mean, I've talked about this with a marketing coach, and you'll say, out of the blue, somebody got in touch with me. How exciting. And then we work out and say, well, it's not out of the blue, is it? Because ultimately they found a blog post because you'd optimized it and somebody found it, or they'd seen you on YouTube, or they'd listened to one of your podcasts, or whatever it happens to be. So the message behind all of this is, it's not really out of the blue. It's as a result of us putting ourselves out there and putting something on Instagram or having a YouTube channel or whatever it happens to be. You're never going to get found sitting on your settee in your front living room doing nothing. Nobody will find you then. Never.
My son, when I first started embroidering, used to pick on me relentlessly about my Instagram and be like, oh, look, Mom, your 30 friends liked your embroidery. I mean, nicely, but
cheeky.
And then it was viral. And then now it's like, he's like, don't even talk to me about how many Instagram followers you have. I don't want to hear about it. That's what you get for picking on me.
Well, exactly. Well, now, of course, you've been on a podcast as well, so you can stick that. Fabulous. It's funny what our kids say though, isn't it? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
my lad's 14 and he's endlessly, when I say I'm doing a podcast episode, oh yeah, and then they go, oh, Mum, you're cool. I've got my headphones on. I was like, oh, Mum, you're cool. You look like a YouTuber or a gamer. It's, the ultimate in accolades there. Oh, you look like a YouTuber. Excellent. Well, I do have a YouTube account, but not in the way you think about it.
He thinks it's hilarious that I have more followers for embroidery than some of the people he follows for things. He's just like, what kind of weird world do you exist in, Mom? Like,
well, it's a weird world that lots of people like to listen and share their embroidery. Exactly. Yeah. What sort of weird world is that people want to listen to a podcast about people wittering on about embroidery? There's lots of us out there, as I'm discovering. Yeah. Brilliant. Right. Well, that's already been a really interesting high point. And then the exhibition that you've got coming up as well. So, wow, you've got quite a lot of work on then, haven't you, really, to come up with a solo show?
It is. It's hard.
Yeah, and you work full time. We'll come on to organising your time in a minute on that one, but it's like, you've got such a lot of stuff to do. Now, you may not have something for this, but again, some of the guests I've spoken to, especially the ones who do kind of messy things, where they're burning things and melting things, have you got any kind of embroidery-related disaster that we can usually have a bit of a laugh about that you might be able to share with us?
I refuse to let a piece die, so
I like that.
Even when I don't like them, I finish them through to the end. It's awful. I don't know what's wrong with me.
You're a complete finisher, aren't you?
So I have lots of embroidery disasters in that sense, where I'm like, just let it go, Michelle, but I don't. I did have a disaster where my vehicle was flooded in a flash flood and totaled, and so I then it's a opposite kind of disaster.
Yeah.
But I wound up having to take the bus a lot, and there's no better way to get to do more of what you love than to have time to do it on a bus. Embroidering and riding on the bus and everybody looking at me like I'm strange because it's not knitting. Knitting somehow is acceptable, but embroidery is not.
No, that's so funny. The interview that went live with Adrian, and we were talking there laughing about, her images were to do with Japanese rope bondage, and so we were having a bit of a giggle there about, well, do you do this? She does it on the train sometimes, and people are kind of looking, and then there's me sharing my silly stories about all these business people in Japan on the train looking at cartoon porn. I don't know why it's considered to be a bit strange to do embroidery on the train, on the bus, but So you took the opportunity of turning a disaster with your car into connecting more with your needle and thread.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a nice one, isn't it? That's a disaster with a happy ending.
No, so far, I have fears that, something will happen and everything in my house will go up, but that's just a fear about disasters in general. You don't want anything like that to happen.
Well, my office is the conservatory on my house, and I live near the coast, and wow, it can get really quite windy. And when you start sorting out your papers and you don't finish, so they're all in piles everywhere, and then I couldn't be bothered to put them all away. So I've had this long running heaps of paperwork everywhere, and but when it's really windy, I've got this vision of my conservatory blowing away and all my papers scattered all around my town. And so even last Tuesday, it was getting windy and windy. And I'm sitting here thinking, this is going to blow away one day. Before I went to bed, I had to collect all the papers up, put them in heaps, and I put them the other side of the door in the dining room. And then my 14-year-old, he had the cheek to say to me, Mum, you've turned it into a bomb site. You turn every room into a bomb site with all your papers everywhere. Because then I started sorting them out in the living room, so they're all piled up in there now. My office is lovely and tidy now. But
yes.
Apparently, I've turned the house into a bomb site. That's coming from a 14-year-old boy, isn't it?
Yes.
Cheeky swine. So the last kind of question that I've got, and we alluded to this before, is you've got a full-time job, you've got exhibition coming up. So how do you organise your creative time, Michelle, and especially when it's hard to be creative on demand?
Yeah, I think because I could do this all the time, I never feel like I don't have any ideas, or if anything, it's like, I just wish the world would kind of disappear so that I could embroider more. And I never, ever, I shouldn't say never, ever, because now it'll strike me, not humble, immodest for saying it, but I don't ever run into any issue with like creative, block or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I embroider I treat it a little bit like knitting, where it's like I'm going to take it with me wherever I go.
Mm-hmm.
Having a show where you need to have enough work for a solo show has been a big challenge for sure, mostly because I sell my stuff and I rely on it as a form of income, and you can't just keep selling things.
And that's a nice it's a nice problem to have, though, isn't it? And a few people have said the same. They're trying to prepare for a show and, they keep selling their stuff. How are they going to get the show going? Yeah.
It sounds awful to complain about it, but it's a source of income, and people want to buy things, and you don't want to be like, no, you can't, but I've really had to put some lockdown on what I part with. I've been selling things to people if I know them and they're local, because I feel like I can get it back.
Yes, you can have it, but can have it back for the exhibition, please. Yeah, good idea. Yeah.
But as far as organizing my time, I really just embroider whenever I can, and that is easier now. My life has changed a little bit in the past year. Things have calmed down. I finished school. My son moved out. I got married. Things are just very calm right now. So it's very much a nights and weekends endeavor. I'm lucky to be married to someone who's a baker and who understands the need to make things at all costs and is lucky enough to be able to do that for a living. And so she's very, very, very respectful of the fact that I have to do this. And she understands what that means. And you cannot ask for a better arrangement with a loved one than for them to really, truly be supportive.
That is so lovely. Yeah, sometimes we have partners who, what the hell are you doing that for? What's that supposed to be? What's that? Yeah. Oh, go away.
Can't you put it down? Why aren't you paying attention to me?
Yeah, it's all give me attention, give me attention. Look, watch this. No, I don't want to watch motor racing. Thank you. I'm watching this. Oh, this is something. No, I don't want to, because I don't watch telly, So that is brilliant, Michelle, that you've got that support. And you said there, everything's calm. So I sense this. Things were chaotic, and now things are calm, and you're feeling more settled in yourself, possibly.
Absolutely. Before it was an escape from a lot of chaos, and now it's just, it's still an escape from, not from chaos. It's just where I like to be.
It's time for you, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I don't know if I have suggestions for people who have. It helps. My son is 19 now, or I don't have little kids. So those things are all very real, very, very real. My job is blissfully 8 to 5 and not, all over the place. So I really do have more structured time now. But one of the things that I think drew me to embroidery as far as time management goes really is that because it is mobile, you can do it and find time for it in ways that I just couldn't with other mediums.
Yeah, and a few people have said that as well. A couple of the guests that done silversmithing or other things. Well, you can't. Yeah. You need piles of equipment and all the rest of it. Whereas ultimately, embroidery can be fitted into a bag and put in a box and taken with you somewhere. The bigger pieces, no, but you can always have a bit on the go somewhere. Yeah, and that does make it a wonderful thing to do wherever we choose to do it.
Yes.
I try and fit bits in at karate lessons now when my son's at karate, and kids walking and kicking and punching around you, and I'm sat there with me sewing. Oh dear. Well, there we are. As usual, we are running out of time. Really, I should make these 6 hours long, shouldn't I? And then I wouldn't run out of time.
Well, I really, really appreciate you taking up this side of the pond, and those of us who are over here. I just admire the work you're doing and appreciate it so much.
Well, that's brilliant, and it's just all a global family of mad people who love fabric and thread. So that's really what I'm interested in at the moment. And it's just nice to connect and talk to people who I wouldn't have talked to either. So my work is global, but this is really nice. So it's been brilliant. And even though I can't say Connecticut very well, never mind.
Oh, you just did it! Look, it just rolled off your tongue.
I got to do it in a pretend American accent, though. So.
What accent? I don't know.
So that's amused me greatly. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. It's been absolutely wonderful speaking to you. You've shared some lovely stories and, some nice personal insights, which I'm sure everybody will be absolutely fascinated, because really, we listen to this, don't we? Because we're all nosy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I love to overshare.
Brill. So good luck with your exhibition next year. The time will soon pass, won't it? So yeah, you make every moment count and get ready for that. So brilliant. Thank you so much, Michelle. It's been wonderful speaking to you.
Thank you. Have a great day, or what's left of it for you.
Yeah, well, it's getting dark now, so it'll be time to cook a meal soon, I suppose.
I'm going to go have lunch soon. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Michelle.
Cheers.
If you liked this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and offers from our lovely guests. Please visit stitcherystories.com to join the fan club. Of course, if you have iTunes, then subscribe there to automatically get new episodes. And why not leave us a review and rating whilst you are there? So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. So keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery stories.